For the first time in Bitcoin's entire price history, it is now true to make the claim that this time is different. Bitcoin is moving about 200 days ahead of schedule, and as we move ahead of schedule, we need to ask the question, will we top out ahead of schedule? As Bitcoin presses against all-time highs, these questions become especially relevant. Let's get into it.
Guys, just quickly before we get into the video, go ahead and check out the VIP group on Telegram. You can find the information and results group with the description below. Finding the payment information, pricing details, and a PDF of all the historical trading results, a 78% win rate. Check it out if you want to trade altcoins. BingX and BitGet are my exchanges. My referral links are down below for 15% trading fee discounts for life. So you can literally save thousands by using my links down there. Both very good exchanges. For details are down below. And then finally, the Crypto Academy's Become a Trader course is having a bull market sale to celebrate the bull market and the bullish price action for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. We're doing a sale here, so if you want to learn how to trade, this is the place you can do it. Take advantage of the bull market. Guys, let's get into the content today without further ado. Bitcoin is moving. It's not stopping. It's actually quite insane. It's spectacular, really. And look, part of me loves to see it, and part of me also sees the negative end of it. We'll look into both those questions in a second. Is it good? Is it bad? But overall, it doesn't really matter what we think of it, whether it's good or bad. What matters is what's happening. And what's happening is going to dictate what's going to happen in the future. So what's the deal here with Bitcoin? Are we seeing something we've never seen before? Is Bitcoin really bringing the theory of this time is different to life? Because historically, anyone who's ever said this time is different has been wrong every single time since the first halving 12 years ago. Think about how long that's been of someone just saying this time is different every time they've been wrong. Well, this time very well might be different. We've got evidence to support it. Right now, Bitcoin is currently pressing up on its all-time high. Its all-time high is in yellow, roughly. We haven't quite broken it yet. In fact, we've rejected from the vague region in which it was placed, and we're seeing some negative price action right now, but it's pretty clear to me that short-term TA is just not something that we should be overly concerned about right now. And we can just easily identify that just by looking at what's happened over the last 2 months, essentially. Since January 25th, it's actually only been like 40 days, right? Basically, let's just see exactly how long it's been. We'll take a measurement here. 42 days ago, Bitcoin was at 38.5K, okay? And without correction in that 42-day period, we have risen 77%. If that shows you anything except for the fact that short-term TA is not really the best metric to analyze Bitcoin right now, I don't know what to tell you. It clearly is the case that short-term TA is not really doing what it's meant to be doing. And that's what happens when you enter a euphoric market. This is not really exclusive to right now because of ETFs. This is just what happens when you enter a euphoric bull market. These short-term structures just constantly have a bullish bias, and that's what we've seen. No correction whatsoever. Just every single structure has been a bullish structure, just breaking up relentlessly. And now we've reached all-time highs, and we've reached that major psychological selling block. All-time highs are a psychological selling block. If we go back in history, let's go to the daily chart, for example, and we go and draw, let me get my cursor out here. We go ahead and draw a line at this all-time high, for example, in 2017, and we can look, we faced that for resistance for a little while. We didn't necessarily correct massively because of it. We did see a correction that stemmed downwards around 17%, but ultimately it took a little bit of time to get above it. You know, we reached that level and it took about a month or 22 days, 3 weeks to get above that level. But, you know, as I said in the introduction, there is evidence to suggest that this time is different. What is that evidence specifically? And then we can get into the question of where will Bitcoin actually go? When will it top out, right? Is the 4-year cycle going to be followed? Because right now, even though there is dramatic evidence that Bitcoin is doing something it's never done before, and we'll look into that again in a second, it's not really confirmed yet the 4-year cycle is broken, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be relying heavily on the 4-year cycle just because it's not actually broken yet through the data. Because the 4-year cycle, as we'll discover in a second, is quite an unreliable metric to kind of rely on when there is differences in market cycle, because it takes a long time to invalidate it. By the time we invalidate the 4-year cycle, we could be down 60% on Bitcoin or 50% on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general. So we need to rely on other metrics to a certain degree this cycle as well, which does put us a bit in the dark. But why is this time different? First and foremost, ETFs is the big thing, okay? And, you know, I'm very much on the side now that ETFs have fundamentally changed Bitcoin. And I don't necessarily think anyone really knows what Bitcoin will look like in the future after ETFs, in the sense that, you know, will ETFs just stop Bitcoin from going downwards? I think that's unlikely, first and foremost, but I also think it's an unhealthy thing to think. We need to be open to the fact that Bitcoin can drop downwards. We have to remember, guys, this is very important to remember, that after the ETF approval, we did actually see downside price action. The ETF was approved right up here, and we did actually see a sell the news event. We had the narrative pumping the price action up, we saw the news release up here, and we saw a sell the news event. We saw a 21% correction. So it's not like corrections can't happen. Please, please, please do not fall into the trap of thinking corrections can't happen, because that's when you end up over leveraging yourself in the market and getting wrecked, okay? The reality is we don't know what Bitcoin looks like now. We have not seen enough data to show us what Bitcoin looks like now. Will the ETF buying continue at this rate? We do not know. What I can say is this. ETFs have been a massive positive indication for Bitcoin. Positive force, I should say, for Bitcoin. 136,000 Bitcoin has been accumulated in total, okay, over the course of the last 2 months. That means that ETFs as a whole hold about 700,000 Bitcoin, which is about 4% of the circulating supply of Bitcoin is held in spot ETFs now. Grayscale is massively selling. They've sold 200,000 Bitcoin in the last 2 months, ever since ETF was originally approved, and that brings the entire net positive inflow of Bitcoins into ETFs under management, 136,000 over the last 2 months, which is a big portion, by the way, of the supply. Around 0.8% of the circulating supply of Bitcoin has been accumulated and added to existing spot ETFs or existing hedge funds under management. So big stuff here, and just per day, we're just seeing basically $300 million in USD worth of inflows into ETFs. Now, it's not like this is single-handedly pumping the price. In fact, ETFs at this point in time only make up around 15% of Bitcoin's trading volume, even on the average day of 300 million inflows. So it's worth noting that still 85% of the trading volume on Bitcoin, and that means that most of the buying on Bitcoin is still coming from retail. And so I would actually argue that the vast majority of the positive price action is coming from retail, but retail is using the narratives that ETFs are pushing the price upwards to justify buying. And so what's actually happening is the ETF is actually having a relatively small effect, all things considered, on the price action. It's retail buying because of ETFs that is really pumping the price action even more, extrapolating it even higher to the upside. Now, obviously, with that said, 136,000 Bitcoins accumulated in the last, 50 days is not a small amount. We can't just disregard it at all. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just saying that the ETF reality, which is the inflows in sheer cash amount, in sheer Bitcoin amount, is actually a relatively small amount in comparison to the retail inflows, and retail is using ETFs as a justification to buy. And the narrative right now on Bitcoin is currently standing at, well, there's going to be a left translating cycle. We're going to see a top sooner rather than later, or we're going to see a super cycle and Bitcoin's never going to top. Those are the two narratives right now. The 4-year cycle has fallen out of favor. If we did polls a few months ago, everyone would have said, or the vast majority of people would have said that the 4-year cycle would play out perfectly. We'd see a top in October 2025. But now we've got a situation where I did a poll 3 days ago, and we have around 55% of people thinking the 4-year cycle will break. And I don't blame them for thinking that. Now, again, I do think the 4-year cycle is valid. The 4-year cycle is the status quo, okay? It's the only thing Bitcoin's ever seen on a cyclical level. And what do I mean by the 4-year cycle? Because there's a couple ways you can describe it, but I'm describing it in the most specific way possible. I'm not talking about, every 4 years Bitcoin tops, right? Because in that case, in order for the 4-year cycle to maintain, all we need to be seeing is a top in 2025. And that's actually possible even with a left translated cycle. What I'm saying when I talk about the 4-year cycle is I'm saying there is a specific underlying date range trend within the broader cycle that is making up a simplified, straightforward target for where the tops and bottoms will be in every macro cycle for Bitcoin. So again, you can make an argument that a broad 4-year cycle, the only thing it would require for Bitcoin to maintain that cycle is a top in 2025. But I'm making the case that that cycle would be useless for all intents and purposes because it's too broad of a date range trend. I would say that the only reason the 4-year cycle is useful to us for the most part is because it has these underlying micro trends which predict a very concise top date and a very concise bottom date for future cycles. Right now, that date lies at October 2025. And I think that if we do see a break of these date range trends, I see no reason why the 4-year cycle wouldn't just collapse as a whole, because the 4-year cycle has only ever existed under the guard of these date range trends, I should say. So look, let me just explain that one more time so you understand, because I think I've just kind of said something that's quite actually provocative. 4-year cycle as a broad metric, right? All it requires is 1 year bull market, 1 year bear market, 2 years accumulation. And so theoretically, in order for us to maintain the 4-year cycle, the only thing we'd need to see is a bull market top in 2025, after the halving this year in 2024. But I would argue that the 4-year cycle is irrelevant unless we see the date range trends that are within the 4-year cycle maintained, because those date range trends are the only thing that has kind of kept the 4-year cycle intact. We've never seen the 4-year cycle work outside of those date range trends. And so if those date range trends break, I would expect the 4-year cycle as a whole to lose relevance. So unless we see a top on Bitcoin in October 2025, I think the 4-year cycle is pretty much scrap and there's no point looking at it anymore. Quite frankly, I do think that's the case. The problem is, right now it's perfectly valid, and the only way it would become invalid is if it was very clear that Bitcoin wasn't topping in October 2025. For example, if we topped out right now and we're down 50% by the time we got to October 2025, it'd be clear that wasn't a bull market top, right? And in that case, it's just one of those things that's very hard to invalidate, and so it's not something we should put all our eggs in the basket of the 4-year cycle, because we have seen data to suggest that we are seeing deviations from the broader macro trends, and there's data to suggest we're seeing a left translated cycle, or at least a cycle that we don't really know much about. So as of right now, my view on the 4-year cycle is it's still valid and we'll still keep an eye on it, but we do need to look at other possibilities, because the 4-year cycle essentially will wreck us if we rely on it fully, and it turns out to be wrong. We wouldn't know it is wrong until it's too late and we're already down massively. So we need to kind of safeguard our flank by looking at other possibilities. And what are those other possibilities? Well, first and foremost, how do we know that this time is different outside of ETFs? We can look at these charts here and show you. For example, we have a chart here, this Bitcoin monthly chart, and as you can see, these yellow lines, the yellow line of the RSI at 76 lines up, 67 lines up with the yellow line on the price chart. What you can see is that these yellow lines in the price chart are kind of like a blockade between the bear market zone and the bull market zone on Bitcoin. When we break that level, we enter a bull market. And what you'll notice is that when we test the yellow horizontal line on the price chart, it happens at the same time as when we test the 67 on the monthly chart RSI. And so breaking that level puts us firmly into a bull market. And it also leads to a break of all-time highs within a couple of months after breaking that yellow level. This has happened on 2 occasions, and on this occasion here, we actually reached 67 on the RSI and this yellow level on the price chart at the same time, and so it validated that trend. But instead of rejecting downwards and then breaking up above it later, like we did in the previous cycles, we actually broke above that level straight away, and we broke above that level preemptively. What you can see is that, generally speaking, from a time of a breakdown from this 67 level to a time of breaking back above it, and hence breaking back above the horizontal level in the price chart, it takes around 1,000 days. That happened in 2 occasions, and it was about to happen in this occasion here, but we just broke above it. We didn't reject downwards. There was just too much buying momentum. And so we've actually front run what we're meant to be doing by about 200 days here. We're about 200 days ahead of schedule, or about 150 days, I should say, ahead of schedule. And this shows us that we're doing something we've never done before. We're moving significantly faster than we've previously done. And that supports the theory of potentially seeing a left translating cycle. If we also look at another metric, which is the time between all-time highs, we can see it generally takes around 1,100 days to break all-time highs from the prior all-time high. 2013, taking a measurement from 2013 to 2017 when we broke the all-time high, it took 1,100 days. The same story in 2018 through to 2020. And if we're looking at how long it's taken now, considering we've reached all-time highs already, it's only taken, it was meant to take 1,100 days, which would have led to a breakout of all-time highs in November this year, but it's only taken 800 days. And again, this is another point of evidence, another separate, by the way, completely separate point of evidence. These are 2 different data points here. They're not connected, at least massively not connected. Not massively connected, I should say, showing us that Bitcoin is around 200 days, 150 to 200 days ahead of schedule. And, this in conjunction with ETFs, it just very clearly shows you that Bitcoin is in a different scenario here. If we're also looking at now, like, well, when is Bitcoin actually going to top out, right? Because this is the big question that emerges. If we're seeing Bitcoin moving faster than usual, if we're seeing Bitcoin, doing something it's never done before, and kind of front running when we're meant to be starting the bull market. We're not even at the halving yet, guys. The bull market usually starts significantly after the halving. The halving in itself is not a bullish event. The bull market, generally speaking, starts a few months after the halving. We're not even at the halving yet. It just shows you how fast Bitcoin's moving this time. And there's many reasons for that. One of them would be ETFs. One of them would be the fact that people already know there's going to be a bull market, and so they're buying before the bull market starts to try front run the market. There's a few theories. We don't really know exactly why, but there's a few very, very prominent theories, and perhaps it's an accumulation of all of them together. But overall, now we've got this scenario where Bitcoin is moving faster than usual. So we have to ask the question: is it gonna top out in a normal fashion? And if it was, right, going to top out in a normal fashion, that would be an October 2025 top. But the problem with that is, if we're going to see a normal top, surely we'd be seeing a normal cycle, and there's evidence to suggest we're not seeing a normal cycle. There's evidence to suggest we're moving faster than usual. So surely if we're moving earlier than usual, we'd see a top earlier than usual. That is the logical assumption to make. It's not a supported assumption. There's no evidence for it, but that's the logical assumption. And so how do we know when we're going to top then? What can we do? Well, we can only guess, because we don't actually know when we're going to top. Because now we're breaking very established macro trends, or at least deviating from them. And so we're in the dark a little bit here. But what we can do is take various measurements. Like, for example, we can look at, the Ichimoku cloud baseline in orange on the monthly chart. And we can see that in the last two cycles, from the time we broke above that Ichimoku cloud baseline, it took around 570 days to reach an all-time high, or to reach a top. The same thing happened in 2021, around 550 days in that occasion. And if that happens again, we would be topping out on Bitcoin in July 2025, which is, a few months before where we're meant to top out as per 4-year cycle theory. There's also other things we can look at. Like, for example, we can look at how long it takes from when we break 67 on the RSI to when we reach the top. And, in 2016, that took 395 days. In 2020, it took a month less than that. And if it's going to take a month less than that this time, that would take us to around 330 days, which would take us to around December 2024. So we've got a few different methods we can look at here. Overly, the fact of the matter is none of them are really overly useful, because they don't really show us with any massive degree of confidence as to when the top will be. They're all very vague, and they're all establishing trends. They're not established trends, okay? There's a difference there. They're all establishing trends. They're trends that are building up right now. They're not established trends. The established trends mostly lie within 4-year cycle, and we're seeing deviations from that at this point in time. So it's a difficult situation, but I think if we are going to see a left translated cycle, the chances are, right, because we know for a fact now that Bitcoin is moving around 150 days to 200 days ahead of time. So if we are going to see a left translated cycle, you could just make an assumption that, well, if we just go from October 2025 and just go 150 days back to 200 days back, that would take us to around between March and May 2025. So that's a very easy way to just make a guess there. Maybe we see a left translated cycle and top out between March and May 2025. But yeah, the point is we've got many data points, some of them saying December 2024, some of them saying July 2025, and then we're doing things like that where we can just take the amount of time we're moving, take the amount of time in which we're moving too fast and kind of minus it, subtract it from when we're expected to top, and it takes us to around March to May 2025. I've seen a lot of people do a few different methods here. I'm not really overly convinced by any of them, to be quite honest with you, but I will certainly be watching out for a top on Bitcoin between the months of around December this year and the middle of next year. I would be, exercising caution between those timeframes. Hopefully, there are better theories that emerge as to how to predict the top. I know we can use immediate indicators, like, for example, this monthly RSI descending resistance line in red. If we reach that level, and say we bounce off of it twice and then start to go down, that's a very good indicator the top is in. There's things like that we can look at, and obviously basic TA, momentum indicators. There's many things we can look at, but in terms of actually predicting it in the future, because it's still a significant time in the future, right? We haven't even seen, how do I know, okay, first and foremost, how do I know the bull market is barely just starting? Well, I can show you right now. First of all, Bitcoin hasn't even broke all-time highs yet. Second of all of the predictive measures are showing us it's going to take us to at least December this year, okay? And third of all, we have Bitcoin dominance, which has not even entered a altcoin season yet. Bitcoin dominance is still rising. We're still putting in higher highs on the monthly chart for Bitcoin dominance. And in order to see a actual bull market, right, in order to actually name it a bull market, you need to see a altcoin season in which Bitcoin dominance decreases massively, and then you reset when Bitcoin dominance starts to flatline, and that's when you see the bear market kick off when Bitcoin dominance starts to rise, because Bitcoin goes upwards more than altcoin, or holds up better than altcoins in the bear market. People flock to Bitcoin for safety. The money cycle flow is a fundamental part of the bull market, and the fact that it hasn't even really started yet is an indication that the bull market hasn't really even started yet. So right now, I think we're in the early stages of a bull market. We haven't even broke all-time highs yet. When we break all-time highs, that's really the first step of saying, like, okay, yeah, look, Bitcoin's going euphoria mode now. If we look at, how long it's generally taken from an all-time high break to a top, we can look at 2016, we broke all-time highs around January 2017, and we topped out around a year later, 330 days later. In 2020, we broke all-time highs around November, and we topped out around, let me just get a measurement here, we topped out around, again, 365 days later. If we're going to do that again, if we're going to break all-time highs, say we break all-time highs this month, around 365 days later, let's just say 330 days later, is February next year. So there's a lot of indicators, although a lot of them are loose, although a lot of them aren't really that supported. The sheer quantity of them shows you that there are a lot of indicators that Bitcoin is just really starting the bull market now, and it should at least last for the vast majority of this year and potentially dig into next year. So we'll have to wait and see. But right now, there is confirmation that Bitcoin is doing something it's never done before by about 150 to 200 days. And that's pretty major, because that's a claim that, again, anyone who's ever made that claim before in Bitcoin's entire price history has been wrong. And this is the first time they've actually been right. So let's see if they're properly right by seeing whether the 4-year cycle plays out this time or whether we see a left translated cycle. We have to wait and see. But it's really an interesting market, guys. And I'm going to stick mainly, I think, to macro trend analysis here for the next entirety of the bull market, basically, because it's very clear short-term price action, especially if it's ETF stuff, is very hard to navigate. I'm personally looking more at altcoins. My interest is more on altcoins right now, preparing for that altcoin season, and also on the Bitcoin macro trends, trying my best to identify where those deviations are and where we can find the best possible metrics to predict the future price action. So guys, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Check out, again, the Crypto Academy bull market sale if you want to learn how to trade. The website is down below. The VIP group for altcoin trading. If you want to trade altcoins with me on VIP, you can do that. And then finally, BingX and BitGet. My referral links are down below. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you tomorrow. Cheers.